The issues affecting you. Revealed, explained, discussed. Now on WGAL 8 in Focus.
Hello, I'm Susan Shapiro. It's been a decade since former Penn State football coach Jerry Sandusky was arrested and later convicted of child sex abuse. The case inspired more than 24 pieces of legislation in Pennsylvania to better protect children and lit up the Childline hotline. Tonight, we talked to 2 child sex abuse survivors who are now advocates about what has changed and what still needs to happen to better protect children and let victims of child sex abuse get justice. We put the impact of the Jerry Sandusky case in focus. Joining us now, Kathleen Palm with the Center for Children's Justice in Reading, and Sean Doherty, who is the board president of SNAP, the Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having us.
You are both survivors of child sex abuse, and obviously it's been a long road for both of you. Kathleen, can you give us a little insight to what happened to you and how it's affected you?
Sure. As a child, and one of the things that oftentimes happens is that those who abuse children look for very vulnerable families and vulnerable children. And my dad died as a child, and a family friend who was trusted to help get us to places and things like that, but also served as a trusted leader in the community, took advantage and sexually assaulted myself and other people. And what oftentimes happens for survivors is that you find a life event that changes the dynamic for you. And while I had told people as a child, but people weren't ready to hear it when I was a child, in college, as I was graduating, a life event with a young woman in my college community where she attempted suicide triggered my own life experiences and came forward and went to the police in the early 1990s. And by then, not only could find a group of victims and survivors a generation above me, but in the generation behind me as well. And so one of the things you have to do at that point in time is figure out what the pathway to healing looks like. And for me, there was not going to be a pathway for justice and through the court system. And so have spent most of my life since then I'm just trying to be a voice for every child, my own children, but also a collective community of children, and to look at systems that serve kids and make sure they do a better job than was done on behalf of myself and others.
Well, that's impressive. And Sean, what happened to you? You were abused by a priest when you were a young boy.
My childhood priest, who was my religion teacher and my basketball coach at the Catholic school that I grew up going to. It occurred over the course of several years. My priest has since been removed. He was credibly accused in 2012, and he was removed from ministry by the Bishop of Altoona Johnstown. And after the Altoona Johnstown report came out in the year 2016, I spoke publicly for the first time. I too spoke earlier when I came out of boot camp in the year 1991, but in 1991 it was too hard for people to hear, and that is the first time in my life I had ever heard the term a statute of limitations, and learned that I was already out. So.
Oh boy, we'll talk more about what has happened in Pennsylvania. What happened when Jerry Sandusky was arrested for both of you? Did that trigger something, and how did you feel then?
Anytime a sexual assault of anyone is in the news, it's a triggering event. When it's a child, it's even more triggering for me. When it occurs in a shower, it's even more triggering for me. I was sexually assaulted, digitally penetrated in a shower. I struggle at times with the shower. And when I heard the references to the sounds that were heard coming from the shower, that was incredibly triggering. It'll make every hair stand up.
And of course, this was many years before the grand jury report in Pennsylvania on the Catholic Church. So
it doesn't take much to trigger. A smell can trigger. Like, a smell is very, very powerful. And a smell that reminds you can put you in a spot that no one would want to be in.
And I think that's one of the things that, we're Jerry Sandusky, clergy abuse. I think, we were talking about this before, like those of us who are survivors have very similar experiences, regardless the class of victims that you potentially are ascribed to or belong to. And I think, that is one of the things, like the center, we started the center so that children had testimony options. Because oftentimes a child may not know the date or the time or the specific thing, or when they're talking, they may say, I had a purple sweater on, but then when they talk to the next person, they may call it a green sweater. And oftentimes that is used to kind of undermine them as a credible. But any of us who are survivors know that the time of day, the smells. There are things that you walk into a room and there is something, the ambiance, the smell, and it takes you right back into that moment. And it's really hard for people to understand that. I think as we learn more about post-traumatic stress disorder and victims of violence or war, people are starting to understand it. But I think we've used that for generations to kind of manipulate, oh, that child doesn't know what they're talking about, or they got the facts a little wrong. They may have the date, the time, the moment a little off in terms of retelling it, but they never are lying about what they experienced.
Very interesting. Well, stay with us. Coming up on WGAL 8 in Focus, we'll continue our conversation with Kathleen and Sean about what they say still needs to happen in Pennsylvania to protect children from child sex abuse.
This is WGAL 8 in Focus, coverage you can count on.
We continue our conversation with Kathleen Palm and Sean Doherty, both child sexual abuse survivors and also very involved in this field now and trying to make things better for children in Pennsylvania. Sean, you mentioned the statute of limitations in your case. Obviously, that's been a big issue in Pennsylvania, trying to pass laws about the statute of limitations.
It has been. Like I said, I first became public about my abuse in the year 2016. I did my first interview inside the office of Representative Mark Rozzi, again, a child sex abuse survivor. Since that day, I have been to Representative Rozzi's office hundreds of times. I have sat in the gallery of the House and the Senate. We have been successful. I'm very proud that Pennsylvania has completely eliminated the statutes of limitation on sex crimes committed against children moving forward. And we have successfully extended the civil statutes of limitation to the age of 55 for the person to file their suit. Unfortunately, here in Pennsylvania, because of lobby efforts and poor politics, the most protective aspect of the grand jury recommendation, the 1 year retroactive look back window, to give victims like us of past abuse who had timed out the opportunity to file civil suit against their abuser, who is still living in the communities, still most likely actively searching and preying upon children today. It's wonderful that today's children have the rest of their lives to file criminal charges. But shouldn't we as a society first do something to protect them from even being abused, which the retroactive window will absolutely do that. But unfortunately, I'm the survivor of the Roman Catholic Church. Now, percentage-wise, there are only so many abusers of the Roman Catholic Church. However, their lobbyists are protecting all of the predators in Pennsylvania.
And I think it's important because, one of the things, sometimes you'll talk to policymakers and they see Sean and I, and we obviously are getting up there a little bit in age, and so it's hard to see us as children. And it's also hard because they don't understand. They oftentimes think, if they see us, they think that our abusers must be like, I once had a policymaker who said to me, like, if they're alive, they have to be like decrepit. And it's just not the reality. And I think one of the things that's really important is that it is important to understand that part of this pathway and part of what people are fighting for the statute of limitations is to break a cycle. It is very possible, not necessarily in Sean's case because that person has been held accountable, but I can assure you in my case that there is absolutely positively every viability that that person still has access to children, and at some point in time had readily access to children based on his own career. And so I think that's one of the things that policymakers miss is that this is still about the children of today. It really may not prove a good tool for the children of yesterday, like Sean and I, but it can still prove a tool for the children of today where we could break a cycle. And I think too much we don't talk about that. We talk about the money, we talk about the lawsuits, we talk about the big business, whether it's the insurance industry or the Catholic Church. We don't say that there are people who could be 60, 70, 80 who have a string of child victims behind them and could still be abusing a child today. Because guess what? It's pretty emboldening. You can feel pretty bold if you've been able to abuse one child after another and never been held accountable.
Well, isn't that exactly what happened in the Jerry Sandusky case? Had the victim who came forward been, listened to, that maybe others wouldn't have been abused?
My hometown, Johnstown, Pennsylvania, former pediatrician Jack Bartow. He was credibly accused in the year 2000. The community supported him, rallied around. He was a school board member, church leader, prominent doctor in the community, rallied around him. They gave him his license back and he practiced for 18 more years. And in 2018, he molested a 12-year-old at the age of 70, and he is currently incarcerated for 158 years. Had we been successful with Representative Mark Rozzi's bill, HB 1947, back in 2016 or 2017, I can make a strong argument that the 12-year-old little girl would have seen a different physician in 2018 had we passed the look-back window in 2016 or 2017.
And as you said, believe the children, right?
And that, I can't say that enough. That's the most fundamental thing that you should take away from our conversation today is, regardless of whether we ever can change the law, and we're going to work hard to change it, but the fact of the matter is, if a child discloses to you, they're disclosing for a reason. That doesn't mean you don't follow the facts. That doesn't mean you don't look for the evidence. But the most fundamental thing you can do is make sure that that child feels embraced and that you believe them.
Good takeaway. Thank you both for being here. We appreciate it, and we appreciate you sharing your stories.
This is WGAL 8 in Focus, coverage you can count on.
Joining us now is the Commonwealth Victim Advocate, Suzanne Estrella. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Suzanne, explain just what the Office of Victim Advocate is and how it was established.
Sure. The Office of Victim Advocate is the state agency with the duty and the authority to advocate for the rights of all crime survivors. We do that through three main initiatives: victim services, crime prevention, and restorative justice. Our office has about 26 advocates on staff, where we are constantly responding to the needs of survivors of crime. One of our main focuses is providing notification to survivors who have offenders in the criminal justice system. So anytime an offender is moved or up for parole, we're providing assistance if that survivor wants to speak at a parole hearing or wants to be notified of what's happening. We have several different programs, training programs. We do a lot to promote resilience in survivors because, as you know, trauma can be long lasting and survivors often have such a difficult time moving forward. So we try to provide services to help survivors move forward. And we're very much centered on collaboration and making sure survivors have local ties to agencies within their local communities for extended services.
Oh, well, that's a lot. Well, we'll talk more about survivors of crime, but in this case, we're talking about the perpetrator, Jerry Sandusky, this being 10 years since he was arrested and later convicted of child sex abuse. So a lot has changed in those 10 years, I imagine, for your office and for the laws in general in Pennsylvania.
Yes, I would agree. We've seen several significant changes as a community. I think the beginning of changing of our culture and giving opportunity to reframe the way we look at and talk about sexual assault.
He certainly came before the Me Too movement, Bill Cosby. Do you think that opened things up, made for a better dialogue as those incidents came along?
Definitely, I think so. I think it's caused us to have to just really look at the fact that this is something that's happening. It can be so disturbing that kind of your first thought is to want to think that this isn't true or this couldn't be happening. but the number of survivors who were affected and just the heinousness of this incident caused us to take a second look and to come to terms with what was happening and what we need to do as a society to make changes and to make sure that our most vulnerable are protected.
Sad to say that it is still happening even after 10 years in many cases. One big thing that changed was the idea of mandatory reporters. Who is a mandatory reporter and just how they have to report? Tell me about that.
Yes, the new laws added about 15 different mandated reporters. So what we're seeing there is then mandated reporting across many different disciplines. They added clergy, of course, we already know school teachers, but healthcare providers and different disciplines were added. And that kind of gives us hope as a community that other people are going to see what's happening and be able to then make that report. The law also required when and how, gave some clarity around how you make the report and who has to make the report to kind of get rid of that loophole that we saw at Penn State where they were suggesting that, oh, I thought this person reported and somebody else thought someone else had reported and then no one had reported. So the law kind of makes it clear as to who's required to make that mandated report to clear up that misunderstanding.
So are those mandatory reporters, they're under an obligation to report if they see child sex abuse or, for that matter, any other crime?
Right. Any suspicion of child sexual abuse on a known child is required to be reported. Yes.
So how do you know when you see something suspicious, when a mandatory reporter sees something they think should be reported? How do you know that, in your gut?
I think it's very important that the person follow their gut. It's going to be investigated. So you don't have the responsibility to prove or to come up with the facts. But the law requires that if you have the suspicion of an identifiable child, that you're required to make the report. So only an individual person can determine if they meet those qualifications. If they have an identifiable child where they have that suspicion, then you should always make the report. I encourage you not to second guess yourself or to try to get all the facts together. If you have that suspicion that an identifiable child is being abused, you should make the report.
All right, well, Suzanne, stay with us. We'll talk more about the victims and how you talk to them in these investigations.
This is WGAL 8 in Focus, coverage you can count on.
We continue our conversation with Suzanne Estrella, who is the Commonwealth Victim Advocate. Again, thanks for being here. I know after the Jerry Sandusky arrests, calls to Childline skyrocketed. Has that leveled off, or you still see a large number of calls to that hotline?
It is my understanding that Childline is still seeing a significant increase in calls. I don't work directly with the Childline, but I have access to review and to look into what they're doing and can see that they are still seeing significant numbers.
Obviously, in this case, we were talking about some very young children, survivors who are, now adults. But I know a lot has changed, in the centers of how you interview children, the number of times they're interviewed. What about that?
Yes, I think this brought to light, the Sandusky incident brought to light the need for child advocacy centers and their value. So across the Commonwealth, we have some really fantastic child advocacy centers where their work is geared for children. They have specialists who are designed to interview children. The facility itself is designed to receive children and make children comfortable. So it's just, it's really focused on the trauma that a child is suffering and then made the services trauma sensitive for that child. So child advocacy centers are just doing amazing work, and I'm so happy that we have them across the Commonwealth.
What are some ways, even if someone is dealing with a child who may have experienced child sex abuse or other abuse, what are some tips on ways to speak with them and to maybe talk with them about what happened?
Well, it can be very challenging, very difficult. My suggestion would really be to reach out to your local sexual assault center or your local child advocacy center where they have advocates and professionals who are trained to do that. That way you don't put yourself in the middle. If there's any type of court case that's going to be involved, you can kind of alleviate the fact that you may have someone suggesting that you somehow misled a child. But the one thing I can say that we all must do is just to start by believing. If the child is saying something happened, then you want to believe that child and take action. If you're a mandated reporter, you want to make that report. If you're a family member or friend, you want to try to reach out where services are available and get help. And I would suggest the local sexual assault centers and the local child advocacy centers.
We often hear that the perpetrators, will threaten children, and in Jerry Sandusky's case, groom the child and make them fearful to tell an adult or someone else what may be happening. Obviously, that's still going on, I imagine.
Yes, that is. But I believe that more people are becoming aware of the shame and the power and control that perpetrators will use intentionally to try to keep survivors or victims from coming forward. So with that knowledge, as parents and caregivers, we always want to keep the lines of communication open. And like I said, at the sign of any suspicion, you want to move forward and take action.
Yeah, better to take some action than to say, maybe it's not going on.
Right. Mm-hmm.
What about these survivors? I know maybe you don't have specific knowledge of these survivors, but in general, as they progress to adulthood, does this, linger with people?
It does. Now, it's a very individualized trauma, very individualized outcomes and results. So there's no one survivor or no one right way to be a survivor. So different people move through their journey differently, but the impact can be long lasting. So we encourage and we try to promote resiliency through support groups for people going to counseling, receiving counseling, providing avenues that survivors find helpful. We have some survivors who are a part of our Resilient Voices program, which are comfortable sharing their story and helping other survivors by sharing their story. So the path can be different, and there are lots of local community programs helping and providing that resiliency for survivors.
Well, we certainly hope so. We thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
If you are aware of suspected child abuse, you can contact the state's Child Abuse Referral Service Childline. The phone number is here on the screen, 1-800-932-0313. It's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Thank you for joining us for WGAL 8 in Focus. For all of us at WGAL, I'm Susan Shapiro, and join us again next Saturday night at 7 o'clock for WGAL 8 in Focus, right after NBC Nightly News.